Hi, my name is Renee Aram, and welcome back to The Addict's Loop. I wrote my book, The Addict's Loop, to describe in detail the root cause of codependence and addiction. If you haven't seen my first video titled Codependent Relationships, you may want to check that out so you'll understand some of the terminology I'm about to use in this next video. You can watch that video at my website, theaddictsloop.com, or the Addict's Loop Facebook page. In this video, I'm going to show you the unconscious mechanics of the Addict's Loop. Now, in my last video, I showed you how two unconscious codependent roles that I've named the controller and the dependent create the Addict's Loop between them during the codependent relationship. They create the euphoric high connection and attraction that always leads to betrayal, rejection, and abandonment over and over and over until it destroys the relationship. The Addict's Loop. And I want to show you this. This is an unconscious loop. In the relationship, in the codependent relationship, the controller and the dependent will gravitate together, and when they feel connected and loved, which is a false definition of love, but they feel that controller feels in control and powerful, and that dependent role feels rescued and safe, this creates this euphoric high fix. So they come through this longing, connection, love bond to the euphoric high fix, right? And what happens is the downside of that is blocked, and I'll explain why. When you're coming down here, the betrayal, rejection, abandonment, it is blocked out. And let me explain how this works. This loop is conditioned during childhood, okay? And the information about codependence being inherited is right. I believe it has come down the generations. It moves unconsciously through each generation, and I find these two roles show up, and I'll show you some codependent mapping in a little bit, how what their MO is as far as attacking the family system. As a child, right, so you have the dependent role. Your father's a controller. And I'll use an example I used in the book. The dad wants the son to be a baseball player, like a pitcher. The kid hates baseball, but he's a dependent. So he's going to people please his father, who has the controller role. It's like, okay, Dad, yeah, sure. They get the mitts and the balls, the bats, and the father starts to practice with them and showing him all these great pitches, and the son actually is doing pretty good. And whenever he feels this kind of equality with his dad, that he's being seen in a positive light, he feels connected at this euphoric high fix. He feels that he's been received, that he's been visible. He's visible now with his dad. So what happens is, let's say the son goes, he plays his first game, and he strikes out 4 kids in a row, and they win the game. The dad is ecstatic and takes him out to the pizza place and is just like, thinks his son's it. So at that point, both roles have found this fix, right? That dependent role feels connected with his controller father, and that's that high point where he feels visible and loved. Now, they go play the next game, and he walks 5 players. He looks over at his dad, and his dad's like looking down at the ground. And after the game, he doesn't say much, but what happens is whenever the child has this connection at some point between the two roles. At some point, they're going to come down this other side. Now, a child can't process this. A child's not going to go, you know, I'm being rejected and abandoned right now. We need to sit down and really talk about this. What are they going to do? They block it out. A child can only see this side, the fix. Whenever the betrayal, rejection, and abandonment happens, the child represses it. It blocks it out and races around, fear, obsession, to find that fix again. Okay, now every time they go around this loop, when you repress the betrayal, rejection, and abandonment, and I want to thank Mary Morse for coming up with this word, non-existence, because that's what a child feels if they're not connected with their family, with their role models. They don't exist. So a child will sell their soul here to feel connected and loved in these codependent roles. So now look at this as the child goes up and around. A child will go around this thousands of times before they leave their house. Every time you go up and around, you're repressing the pain, the anger, the resentment, whatever else bad happens in the family is repressed on this side, okay? And now, as you go around, the pain is stacked. So the more you repress the pain, it starts to rise. So this rising pain, by the time the child's, 10, 11, they start wanting to numb it out. Video games, drugs, alcohol, anything, because this pain here between the two roles creates a point where it'll rise, and what's going to happen here when it finally gets to this point? When that fix is done, the boy's like, you know what? I don't care if I connect with him anymore. I give up. I don't care. Shuts the door, and that's it. The relationship is flatlined. There's no connection anymore. And this is when you get into when a child hits this point, when the pain is greater than the fix, a lot of bad behavior can come out of that. Because they're out of body. They're numb. So they can get into a lot of self-destructive behavior. All right? So this is conditioned during childhood. Because it's in the unconscious, we take it into our adult relationships. The conditioning, that dependent child that has that dependent role, will gravitate to controllers. And I want to give you an example. Let's say there was abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. It was repressed here in the loop. Do you understand why it's repressed? Both these roles, the controller is the false god. The dependent is the subservient. It's an unconscious dictatorship that is created. Okay, and it's a closed system. There's no spirituality in codependence in these two roles. That controller is basically the false god. This is the focus of the dependent role. And so what happens is, if that controller hurts the dependent, well, the dependent, because they believe that they deserve the pain, they carry the pain, they're the weak and needy one. The dependent role is the one that doesn't know, that's going to follow the controller, worship the controller. And so what they do is, when they take that hit of abuse, they're like, I deserve that. I did something wrong, and I deserve that. And this is some serious abuse can happen, and the child represses it down inside the loop. Okay, and similar thing with the controller. If let's say the dependent role, this kid one day explodes because the dependent role represses its anger, usually, and it stacks. The dependent role, wait, and then explode. And you don't want to be around when the dependent role blows up, because they've been repressing this anger, usually sometimes for years. So what happens is that controller role might take the hit from the dependent. Let's say the little boy is like so frustrated, picks up a baseball, throws it, and hits it in his dad's head, right? The dad, the controller role, will go, I lost control. This is my fault. So the two roles protect the abuse in the system. And so let me show you what happens in adult relationships where somebody is attracted to an abusive relationship and they don't know why. They keep finding the same abusive relationship. And it could be, the battered wife, the abused wife, or the abused husband, which is the great American secret. But let me show you what happens. Let's say that the young boy has repressed abuse in the addict's loop. He's going to go off in his adult life and find a controller to reenact this repressed event. So what happens is the boy grows up, could find a controller girlfriend, right, that at some point into the relationship, the same abuse starts to happen. And it's a really, if you look at when the two roles come together and create the euphoric high fix, the repressed abuse rises up into the connection. So the insanity of the message is, for me to be loved and feel safe and connected, I need to be abused. Do you understand that? Because it's trapped in here, it rises when the two roles find that fix, the abuse will come up and get enmeshed with it. And that's why you have people, that keep going back into these abusive relationships. They don't know why they're attracted to this person. They get into it. It starts off great, and then it becomes abusive. They leave, but they're drawn to come back because the definition, the unconscious definition of love is, for me to feel connected and loved, I need to take the hit. So we inherit the two codependent roles, and during childhood, learn to create the destructive addict's loop between our surrounding relationships. Because of this, we learn a false definition of love and re-experience their betrayal, rejection, and abandonment over and over into our adult relationships, and then pass it on to our children. This pattern has to end. In my book, The Addict's Loop, I describe in detail my coda addiction model, and then in the workbook section show you how to counter condition and neutralize your own unconscious codependent roles. In my next video, I'm going to show you the root cause and unconscious mechanics of addiction. My name is Renee Aram, and this is The Addict's Loop. Until next time.